Got me on? There we go. It's about time for us to get started. I got maybe just another minute, but we'll let everybody kind of slide on in before we get going. Any prayer requests this morning? Already been given one. Terry Moore's wife, Susan Moore, they found some more tumors with her and are giving her an expected life of 2 days to a week. So remember Terry Moore. That's my cousin and Lisa's uncle. Can you turn me up just a little bit? Terry Moore is one. His wife, Susan, they found some more tumors on her, and it's inoperable and giving her basically 2 days to a week to live on it. So remember Terry Moore. She's had a lot of other health issues along the way. But any other requests? Juanell Thompson, right? Lavelle Coker and Juanell Thompson. Laverne, sorry. Okay, Maggie Hester had everybody praying at one time for her. I heard one of more over here. Tennyson family. John Roten and Nada Bullock. Both facing surgery. When are those going to be, Jim? Do you know? Nada. Also, Jerry Hester, who had surgery on the 28th. Any other requests? Any prayers? Yes, sir. Evelyn Floyd. Any prayers of Thanksgiving? Nicole Estes, they did a full body scan, found no evidence of any cancers. Going to have some further tests along the way, but we're thankful for that first clear sign. We just need to find out what's causing the current fevers that she's having. She's been having those for about a month now, is that right? Yeah, almost 2 months having fevers. Anybody else?
Continue to remember Greg in our prayers.
Mm-hmm.
We've got about 10 of us going up to Campbell, Missouri next weekend, door knocking to Mission Gospel meeting.
Remember Greg Pollock on his mission trip. Seems watched a little bit on Facebook, and he's done well on that. And we've got a group going to Campbell, Missouri to door knock and to have a campaign. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We will. Also, I don't know if y'all know Rob Smith. He's going to be heading home to Texas. His wife Jessica and their daughter had already moved out there, getting back closer to her family, and he's got him a new job out there. So y'all may not have had a chance to know him, but he was a good worker for me in the video ministry, always very dependable. And so it's a loss that I'm going to experience, but his family was a good family. So remember him in your prayers as they're making that transition and he's getting to reunite with his family. If there aren't any others, we'll go to our Father in prayer. Would you bow with me? Father in heaven, we thank you so much for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to come together, to study your word, to lift up petitions to you, to give you the honor and praise that you're due, Father, to express our love to you, to express our needs. We're thankful for this avenue of prayer that you hear through your Son, that you hear through the Spirit, Father, when we don't know what to say. Father God, there's many on our hearts today that have been lifted up by name. We pray that you will be with each one of these in their needs, Father God, in their transitions and in their struggles. Be with those that are around them to comfort them. Be with the doctors to help find solutions to their health problems or to determine what is causing their ailments. Father God, be with those that are in transition that have been a part of us, Lord, but are moving to other locations. Father God, we're thankful for them coming into our lives, and we pray that they will be shining examples in your kingdom as they change their locations, Father. Father God, we are thankful for blessings and answered prayers that we receive all the time, and sometimes we fail to acknowledge them, but we know that you are a mighty God, and we want to say thank you for answered prayers. Lord, we now want to ask that you'll be with us on this time as we will focus our attention on your word. May our hearts and our minds be engaged, Father. May we apply these lessons and these thoughts from this Bible hour as well as our worship setting. May we apply them to our lives so that we can draw closer to you and have a focus more on your will, Father. Lord God, there's often times that we fail to do your will, and we ask for your forgiveness in that. Father God, we are human. We ask for help to continue to get better. Help us to strive to get better. We love you so much, and it's in Christ's name that we pray. Amen. All right. One other little announcement. I don't know if y'all saw in the paper this week or saw it posted on Facebook. The eldership did one final advertisement related to the vote this week, and it says, "Thank you for all those who supported our efforts in the recent alcohol referendum. The outcome of this election does not change who we are or the warnings God has about the abuse of alcohol. Like God in John 3:16, we love every person in Boonville and want everyone to be saved. We will continue to be interested in the welfare of the people of Boonville, both in this life and the life to come. We are aware of the destructive nature of alcohol. If alcohol is a problem for you and your family, we want to be a resource for you and your family. We know that the only true answer is found in Christ. We welcome you and your family to come worship and study with us." Leadership of the Boonville Church of Christ. I have a unique ability in my technology position as deacon to see the responses of the community through this process. In our advertisements through social medias, we had lots of supporters. We had lots of opponents. And when this response was ultimately posted, it didn't matter which side of the aisle they came on, the vast majority were appreciative of our stance, appreciative of what we did. And so a lot of people weren't willing to stand up with that. And so I even heard yesterday walking around the Fall Festival, people saying thank you. So eldership, whether y'all hear that or not directly through the community, we made an impact on other people that were against it as well. So just want you to be aware of that and know that it wasn't a fight that we should have backed down from. So thank you for supporting the elders in this. And just because something's available in our community doesn't mean that it's something that we should endorse, continue to endorse. we still have the free will to do right and to do wrong in life. We will continue our study here on, can you turn me down just a little bit? I feel like I got a bad echo. On our biblical study on finances, and I had a couple of comments following class last week, and I know I didn't get into any kind of application matters, and we're going to do that just here real briefly on how to not outlive the retirement or help to outlive your retirement. And it all comes down to an income and expense, a cash flow matter. Anytime you're dealing with a budget, you either have to increase income or decrease expenses in order to get things to balance out, right? Sadly, we're seeing the Walmart greeters of the world go away, right? They've let those go. So, everybody that went into retirement hoping to be a Walmart greeter, well, that job's not there anymore. I understand this is probably the hardest one to succeed in. I would encourage you to, if you do have investments or CDs or just savings accounts, look for higher interest rates. You may be only getting 0.5% or 1/4% or 1%. I can tell you a place where you can get 2%. Okay, money's just as secure, still FDIC secured, so you're already increasing benefits there. Look at your investments. Make sure that you're properly allocated in your investments to give you a reasonable return. Remember, you have to keep up with inflation in some way, otherwise you're always losing ground. So that's one side. The other side of the coin is on the expenses. Okay, how do we decrease expenses? Well, one option may be to downsize in your house. That automatically should decrease your utilities, decreases insurance costs, goes around and reduces all those costs for you to get on a more stable footing, so that you can have what you have can last longer. That's all assuming that you have your current house paid off, and so you can sell the house, pay for a lower cost house, and then you're pulling some equity out as well. So you're able to utilize that plus lower your monthly expenses. Reducing recurring bills. Now, whenever I talk about that, I'm talking about insurances, talking about like car insurance, talking about your cable bill, your internet bill, your cell phone, your telephone bill. Renegotiate those things. Threaten to leave. You'll be amazed what they come up with to try to keep you, okay? So, who has a cell phone? Do you have a landline also? Drop the landline. There's money right there real quick, okay? Those things are going away little by little, okay? Very few people have both, or several people have both. Some require it for security systems, so I understand that. It's kind of the boat I fall into at the moment. But who calls you on your landline? Vast majority, it's telemarketers, right? Let's get rid of them. Those are just a headache. Renegotiate that cable bill. You can get Hulu Live. It's it's a internet-based video service. I pay $45 a month for that. Compared to, I get all the local channels, the local stations, I get all the major news networks, I get all the ESPNs, I get everything. Hulu Live is what that is, okay? So those are some offerings that you can do to reduce, where you're paying $150, $120 for cable, you can drop that to $40, now $225, see? You can drop that down. Now, you do have to have a good internet signal to be able to do that, okay? You do have to get into a little bit of technology, so calling your kids, calling your grandkids to teach you how to do that. It's relatively simple once you get into it and get set up, okay? But you go from $225 and you already have internet at a decent speed down to $40, that's $165 in your pocket every month. Over a year, 160 times 12, you're talking $1,500, right? Just like that, okay? Drop the landline. Renegotiate your subscription contracts. Like I said, go through your monthly bills, look at them, call them up and say, look, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to go to a competitor. They're going to find a way to try to keep you. Now, this isn't a one-time thing. You might have to do it again here in 2 years once that contract comes up, okay? But look through your month-to-month expenses. See what you can do. Shop around interest rates. I tried doing this last time. It's something that John, whenever we're teaching our finance class, I don't know who he was paying insurance for. He said he was able to get massive savings. I can't find it on mine because I tried separating, doing one house versus home joint separate. I was already getting a better deal than I realized, but you may not be. Okay, so shop around those insurances. Anything that you can help to do to reduce those costs, that helps your limited resources last longer. Okay. Any other thoughts? Any other questions? Any things you might have done that you might want to share with the class? All right. So that was just going to finish up that's part of our study. Today, we're going to talk more about estate planning. We've been announcing that there's going to be an estate planning seminar at Foot Street this afternoon. I think that's at 3. At 2, 3, I don't know, somebody, it's in the bulletin, it'll be announced. 3 o'clock, Tommy's telling me 3. Be from 3 to 4:30. So that's going to be probably more of a nuts and bolts type thing than I'm going to be able to get in today. Just like last week, everybody's situation is different. Okay, so it's going to be hard for me to give you something exactly appropriate for your situation, but we're going to be able to give you some general ideas, some general thoughts and tips to go about. Now, just like last week, we talked about retirement, and well, when you talk about retirement, we have to talk about what happens to all your stuff after retirement. Well, when we're talking about retirement, we have to talk about how long you're going to live, so we had to talk about death. Now we get to talk about what happens to your stuff after you die. Somehow Jonathan always gives me the fun topics, where we get to talk about death and you dying, and then what everybody else gets to do with your stuff whenever you die. So, I get the happy topics, the uplifting ones. As most of y'all know, I'm a CPA, and so some of the things that people think about whenever they die is death tax. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get that out of the way. Unless your estate is over $11 million, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, anybody fall in here? No? Okay, great. On to the next thing. Top 1% is all that affects. Mississippi does not have an estate tax law, so again, don't have to worry about that. Now, if your estate is open after you die for a while, it's possible it may pay an income tax just like you would, but that's something totally different. That's like paying tax on interest income, dividend stocks, just like you do now on your retirement benefits, all those type of things. So there's possibility that you're going to pay some income-related tax, but not a tax on the assets that you have. All right. Who in here believes that you should leave something behind to either other beneficiaries, your spouses, your children, grandchildren? Who has that thought that they should be doing that, preparing? Everybody pretty much agrees with that. What's your goal? Does anybody want to share what your personal goals or your reasonings or what your hopes for with that retirement take care of? Anybody have any goals that they would like to share that they might have done or that they are in process of doing?
We have 2 grandchildren that are autistic.
Okay.
And we want to make sure that they're taken care of after we're gone.
Okay, so we've got medical needs for grandchildren and wanting to make sure that there's monies available to them for when they're gone. Okay, and have you done anything to help ensure that you think about it? Okay, you haven't done anything yet. Okay, all right. So there's something. We've identified a goal, but now we got to take its next step to make sure that what happens satisfies that goal. Okay, it goes back to we have a plan. Now we've got to implement that plan. Okay, so for this, we may need to set up a trust. We may need to set up something with those children's and their medical needs being identified in a trust. So it skips your children and goes straight to the grandchildren's needs. So that's an option there. Any other goals or considerations?
Should this not be done before you retire?
You can do this through gifts and such for retirements. You can, it really all has, it can be all a part of your will. Doesn't have to be done before your death, because in this situation, she may have her own medical needs that she needs to take care of, and there's nothing to provide to the grandchildren. Okay, and so you can write your will in such a way that whatever's left in my estate goes towards the benefit of the grandchildren. But it doesn't put her grandchildren over and above her own needs while she's in retirement.
Yeah, but have your needs then.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said.
Yes, have your own needs.
And
Mm-hmm.
then also take care of your,
She can help with her grandchildren's medical needs throughout time, throughout her life. Her primary, what I understood her goal and desire to be, is after she's no longer able to do that in her life, she wants what she has now to continue to help meet their needs. Is that true? Okay. Mm-hmm. It can vary. It can vary. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. 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 Gotcha. Okay, so she's established in her will that says, I've got some assets that one of my children has been heavily involved in help building up, helping take care of, and I want those assets to go specifically to her, and then everybody else gets the other two things. So she's done a specific allocation of assets to one, and then everybody else gets everything else, which is reasonable. It's something I see often. You just want to make sure everybody understands that that's what your wishes are, and that's what the will does. Don't let something in your will be a surprise, because what could happen in that situation is if the other children didn't know that was going to happen, you get hurt feelings after you've passed away. There's often times that families have disagreements long after you're gone. Yes, sir. Yeah, I was about to get there. Make sure there is a will. Okay, we'll get to that.
Probably, of course, I know I'm strange to everybody, but I plan, unless I die unexpectedly, to have my will read before I die, so that my son, my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren will already know exactly what's going to take place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody does that or not, but I'm planning.
I don't think it's an unreasonable act. I wouldn't necessarily say it has to be for all 3 generations, but if that's what you want to do, that's fine.
My great-grandchildren, of course, are my most concerned because they're
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what she says, she wanted to make sure that everybody heard the will before she passed away. Okay. Now, there's times that when we do that, we may hurt some feelings while we're still alive, and we're going to strain some relationships there. So it gives you an opportunity to explain your wishes and for others to have an opportunity to understand. And you can always change your will. That's very true, and we're going to talk about some few things on that. So, well, you got to have a will first. That's right. So you want to have a will first, and then if you ever want to update it, we're going to talk about some things on that real quick. Okay. Whatever your goals are, whatever your desires want it to be, make sure that that's what your will states. Okay? Sorry, I got ahead of myself. All right. And then again, we've talked about why we might want to leave something to the next generation. So, in regards to inheritance, I found this on an online article. I thought it was good. In regards to inheritance, as an example of parents ensuring their family is cared for after their death. When most people think of parents leaving an inheritance for their children, is in regards to material possessions. The Bible definitely supports the idea of parents leaving their material possessions, wealth, property to their children. At the same time, parents should not feel obligated to save everything up for their children's inheritances, neglecting themselves in the process. It should never be a matter of guilt or obligation. Rather, it should be done as an act of love, a final way of expressing your love and appreciation to children. Okay? It's an act of love that you want to give your children something good after you pass. Okay? It's Not an obligation that you got to keep and save everything and limit what you do in your retirement for what you've saved up and built. I remember oftentimes going out to grandparents and saying, well, I'm just spending your inheritance. Okay, great. That's what my grandfather would say when we go out to eat. Yeah, I'm just spending your inheritance. So, they viewed it as not really belonging to them anymore, but didn't have a problem spending my money, or my mother's money. So, and that's fine. The way I've always viewed it is, it's not my money. What my grandparents have, what my great-grandparents have, it's not mine. I still have to make my way through life. I still have to be responsible for myself financially. And then if there's blessings that get passed down later, great. If not, that's fine. There's oftentimes people leave everything to their cats. Why they do that, I don't know, but they love their cats more than they love their children. So, you can't expect it. Don't expect them to expect it, but realize that it's an act of love. It's an active way of giving something when you whenever you're no longer able to use it. All right, the Bible gives us some clear verses. I'm going to shoot through a few verses here real quick. Proverbs 13:22. A good man leaves inheritance for his children's children. Good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. That means we need to be preparing not to just be able to take care of our kids, but as we talked about, being able to take care of our grandkids if we're able. Okay? Now, it talks about it as a virtue. Yes, sir. Oh, I got that. That's at the end. I know it's not just talking. That's a virtue of more than just a material blessing, but with the thought and the need there of that inheritance, providing for all those generations that follow after us. Psalms 20. Yes. Yes, sir. We were going to talk about that too. I may have to teach next week because we got a lot of material here. We can overburden someone with a lot of money. That's true. Psalms 25:13. This is talking about during a prayer regarding those that fear the Lord. Verse 13. His soul shall abide in well-being, meaning the one who's praying, and his offspring will inherit the land. So we obviously see that what that person had is going to be left to the next generation so that they can be provided for their needs. Psalm 69, verses 35 through 36, this is where David wrote, sometimes it's not just what we leave our kids through an estate. For God will save Zion and build up cities of Judah, and people shall dwell there and possess it, and the offspring of his servants shall inherit it. Many take for granted what our forefathers have left behind for us. Look around you today. We don't think about this building and this facility and what the generation before us provided to us, but this has been left for me and my family. Many of you in here helped build and fund for this. You may not consider this congregation, this church, as being a part of what you're leaving to the next generation, but it is. Sometimes it's stuff that happens that you've made a gift towards or something that you've contributed to a long time ago can still have lasting effects for the next generation, for those that are inheriting it. Okay. 2 Corinthians 2:14. This talks about children are not obliged to save up for their parents, but parents for their children. This isn't necessarily it isn't just purely talking about an estate situation, but in general, parents are supposed to take care of their kids, and in general, it's not expected for children to take care of the parents. Now, that does not negate what we're told in 1 Timothy 5 through 13, where we're called to take care of relatives, we're called to take care of widows, or in Mark 11 through 13, where the Pharisees were instructing people, basically saying for people to tell their parents, I'm sorry, what I've given has been dedicated to the Lord, and so I can't help you. Mark 7, 11 through 13, but you say that if anyone declares that what might have been used to help their father and mother is korban, that is devoted to God, then you no longer let them do anything for their father and mother, and so they are no longer able to honor their father and mother. So Children, when able, are to take care of their parents whenever the parents are unable to take care of themselves. But in general, parents are expected to provide for the next generation. Go ahead and turn to Luke chapter 12. We're going to be in and out of this throughout our lesson, so if you want to turn there. Lastly, we see in Luke chapter 12, verse 13, we see a parable that we all are familiar with. Even Jesus had to deal with inheritances. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or arbitrator between you?" And he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." So as a leader in the community or in the area, people turn to Christ to help take care of some of their problems. And financial problems was one of them. And we'll talk more about this here in a little bit more. So we see both from the new and the old that leaving something behind for the next generation is expected. It's the norm. It can be a matter between brothers of which, and we can see that problems can arise from inheritances, whether that's squabbles between the beneficiaries that are left behind, or giving such a large gift that it affects the children. In the Old Testament, we have examples and guidance for how they handled it. I'm not going to go into all those details, but we know that the eldest son was given a double portion in Deuteronomy 21. If there were no sons, the daughters were allowed to have an inheritance in Numbers 27. And in the absence of direct heirs, a servant or a more distant kinsman could inherit it from Genesis 15:2 and Numbers 27. So they had a real guidance. They had a cultural norm that was expected. We don't have that today. We have what are called wills and testaments. Okay? And that directs everything that happens with your funds after death, whether that's going to a spouse, whether that's going to children, or giving a priority one to the other, that's setting up trust to take care of grandchildren. It's basically, it puts everything in one document that says, this is what I want to happen. It's the last thing I want everyone to know. This is what I want everything to be done with that I have. So, who has a will? We're going to start there. All right. Who doesn't have a will? Let's go up to there. All right. Yes, sir. It depends. Okay? In Mississippi, if you die without a will, and y'all set right up into this, it depends on the assets that you have as to what happens to them. Okay? Assets that pass outside of the will. Okay? First off, if you have, so I can read it, a living trust, your will does not control that. So a lot of times people will put a house in a living trust to protect it from Medicaid and being sold, and that's where, and the government claiming those funds to reimburse their expenses. So you have a living trust that passes outside your will. Life insurance proceeds that passes outside your will. Retirement accounts pass outside your will. Transfer on death accounts pass outside. Payable on death. Joint tenancy with right or survivorship. All those are accounts that supersede your will. Basically, they never make it into the calculations for the will. Now, back to your question. So if everything else is what we're dealing with your question, that you have assets with. Your house. If you die intestate, meaning you don't have a will when you die, depends on how your family structure is. If your spouse is alive and your children are alive, they both get equal shares. If you only have a spouse, your spouse gets it. If you only have children, your children get equal shares. If you have a spouse and one child, they both get 50-50 or split pro rata across everybody. If you have no children, no spouse, it goes up to your parents. If you have none of those things, they find the closest relative that they can. And if they can't find that, it goes to the state. Okay? So, yes, it answers your question. I think that addresses your question. There is some default in the state law that takes care of those things, but it may not be what you want to have happen. Okay? Because if it goes to a minor child and the mother, then we've got to have somebody that represents the minor child interest. The mother may not, if you have multiple children, the children have a greater ownership in the house than the mother does. And so you deal with some more conflicts if you don't have a will that says, I want the house to go to my spouse, and then I want to set up these accounts to benefit my kids. Harold, do you have a question? I don't think so, no. That's a legal question. I'm not an attorney, so I always like to have that little feather in my cap that's, but I don't believe it has to be officially recorded, but you want to be able to give everybody, here's my latest copy, okay? You want to be able to tell people, here's where it's at, okay? So that they know where to find it. But as far as to be reported before you die, no, I don't think so. Yes, it does have to be witnessed, yes. Yeah, somebody has to observe it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, that's the witness. Somebody has to sign that you signed it, that was what you agreed to, what you wanted. Okay? Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. And then some of those proceeds went to pay off some of those medical bills too, I imagine. So there are benefits to a living trust, having the house put in there, but there's also some negatives. You deal with some tax consequences whenever it passes outside your will on that. I know some people will set up, I believe, a conservatorship where someone takes care of, can help take care of your financial matters. A power of attorney can help take care of those matters for a parent. But yeah, you really need to let the next generation know what all you have and where it's at, because if you're not organized and they're having to come in behind you, it just makes it that much more difficult for them to process everything. Yes, ma'am. The power of attorney does end at your death, but whenever I was talking about the power of attorney, that was helping you in her situation. She was having to clean up a bunch of stuff while her father was still in the nursing home. That power of attorney allows you to act on their behalf without necessarily having the assets in your name. Okay? Good questions, good questions. All right, we're going to take kind of a quick step back, and this is going to be some tips and some things to help you prepare for the worst case scenario you pass. For those that are younger, and even for those that are working families, and occasionally for older people, life insurance is something that you need, okay? How much do you need is always the big question. Insurance guys going to want to sell you as much as possible. You want to take, here's an acronym, DIME. You want to have enough life insurance that takes care of your death expenses, your funeral. Who knows how much an average funeral costs? About $10,000 or even greater than that, depending on whatever add-ons they want to have. For those that are still working, you want to take care of lost income. If you're the primary breadwinner in the family, to take care of your children until they reach 18. Okay, so as your children get closer and closer to being out on their own, that number, that need is going to decrease. You want to make sure that you can take care of mortgages and other debts. Okay, because you don't want to leave behind a burden on a house. You want to be able to provide that house to your spouse so that they have it free and clear, and they're not having to make a life decision to sell the house to be able to take and then go get it, having to get somewhere else and reduce their standard of living that you want them to have. Education expenses, schooling, college. Guidance I've seen is you want to have $100,000 per child in your life insurance policy, okay, to take care of their education needs. Now, that's a discussion we could have a long time about, but that's the guidance that we have right now. And you want to review and adjust these goals throughout your life. So hopefully that's something, that insurance is something that's going to go down further and further and further. Because once you have the house paid off, once you don't have any kids in the household, once you're retired, life insurance starts getting real expensive, right? It's not worth it anymore, okay? And so you reach a certain point of age and says, it's not worth paying that for. pretty much the only thing on this list you got to continue taking care of are those death expenses. And you may have a bank account set aside to take care of that. Okay? You can prepay funeral expenses, but sometimes funeral homes, and I'm not talking about any specific, but you can see where there's been a lot of funeral homes that have taken advantage of people in an emotional situation for the next generation, where they ask you all these questions. Do you want to do this? Do you want to do? Yeah. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger than what has been prepaid, and so you have another expense to take on. Okay, so in that, you want to make sure that your funeral, you have that planned out. Help out your kids. I want this casket is already picked out. I only want these services, and you get it put in stone so that all they really have to do is go up to the funeral home and say, "Daddy died," and they say, "We have his plan right here. They paid it all off. We got it taken care of." But you want to monitor that. Okay, don't just assume that we did it 15 years ago. That what we did back then is still good today. Okay, because funeral homes change hands. Sometimes a package that you bought isn't exactly the same. Again, I'm not an expert in that area, but I know that there's a lot of people that get taken advantage of because they're in an emotional state and they want to provide the best, for lack of a better word, send off, at that funeral for that event. Okay, make sure you have a burial plot. Sometimes there's things that we haven't thought about that you get those expenses that add up. It does. It does. Cremation is an option. Mm-hmm. That's true. If mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They very well may. Make sure that whatever your wishes are known, whether cremation or burial, that your kids are aware of that. I've got a client who joked about she wanted to be cremated, and her daughter is just upset about it. I don't want that to happen to you. I don't want. And so, the mother that's going to be cremated, she's perfectly fine with it, but the daughter has issues with it. Okay, my grandfather was cremated, and he wanted that to be an immediate act, so my mother never got to view him prior to that. So there's some emotional things that need to be, some people want to have that closure. My grandfather lived in Houston, so there wasn't something that they could just go over there and see. It was all over and done with by the time she got there. So. Mm-hmm. Basically, that's what you say you want your wishes known to be, and rather than embalming and having a viewing and then cremating you, they put you in line, and once it's time, then it's time for that to happen. Okay. It depends on what your wishes are. That's what my grandfather's wishes were, and so that may not be everybody's situation. Okay, but that's where you got to have these conversations. Okay, because there's a lot of emotion at that time. And if you can deal with them, you may not like it, but that's what your wishes were. And so the children are more accepting of that. They may not like it, but it's rather than being surprised at that time. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things is you kind of have to look at your family. What the question was is whether to have long-term care insurance for a nursing home. You kind of have to look at your own health situation, what your own life expectancy was, what your family went through, and so there's a lot of facts and circumstances. It does get expensive the older and older that you get, and so that's where it comes into, if that's a concern and you're wanting to protect assets and you expect to go into it, that's where a life estate may be a reasonable thing for you. And we'll talk about that, I think, in the next slide or two. A life estate, putting your house into a life estate. Basically, it gives you the right to use that property, but you've actually gifted it over to your children. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. A life estate is basically where you put an asset into into this, essentially a trust, for the benefit of two other individuals, but you get to use it while you're living. Yeah. But long-term care insurance, some people have it, some people don't. Long-term care still doesn't take, sometimes will not take care of 100% of the cost. It depends on the plan that you have. Some of them will take care of a specific amount. Sorry.
Gene Thornton had long-term care insurance policy, and he thought it was a lot more than what it was.
Mhm.
He actually getting it,
The
implementing it,
proceeds.
thinking the payments are coming in, you may be in for a big surprise.
Yeah. So have a good understanding of whatever insurance policies you have, okay? Five years, yes. And yeah, there's a 5-year look back on any gifts that you're making. Meaning if you die, if you make a big gift, now it's not just on a life estate, this is any gift. If you're making gifts to the next generation because you are trying to get money out of your estate in order to protect it from Medicaid or from being used for your final medical expenses, they can look back 5 years and basically unwind and undo all those gifts. And whenever they do that, federal government doesn't just come looking for the estate, they come looking for who received those gifts. Okay, so you may, as a beneficiary, your children may have to turn around and repay some of that. Guys, it looks like our time's up. I'm going to finish this lesson next week. I'll let John know, and then we'll finish up next week. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your attention.